This is Dina. Welcome to the Den. Also, welcome to the 5th Hellraiser movie. That's right, we've crossed the barrier separating the theatrical releases from the straight-to-DVD sequels. Something to keep in mind about these movies is that A, there's no involvement from Clive Barker, and B, the people who made these movies generally wanted to set them apart from the earlier ones. And to be fair, I'm not saying more Hellraiser sequels needed to be made. But there just comes a time where if you're gonna keep making sequels, you have to start changing things. Otherwise it just feels like the same movie over and over. And yes, of course Clive Barker hates these movies, but let's be perfectly honest, okay? He has ample reason to be biased. They took a creation of his and changed it. Of course he's going to hate it. If someone did that with one of my characters, I'd probably hate the final product too, no matter how it turned out. But that doesn't make the straight-to-DVD sequels objectively bad. Of course, they aren't all objectively good either. I'm just saying that I know how it sounds with a lack of involvement from Clive Barker and the fact that they went straight to DVD, but let's give them a fair chance instead of just assuming they'll be bad. I love this opening sequence, both the imagery and the music. Maybe not very Hellraiser-like, but I still dig it. Oh, that's better. Anyway, we open on this guy who looks vaguely like Angel sometimes. He's also a hell of a chess player, apparently.
You played right into my game, Professor.
So this is Joseph Thorne, a police investigator, so cue the film noir style narration.
Even as a little kid, I was always one to examine things closely. The world was full of riddles and mysteries and puzzles.
Yep, he likes puzzles. I think we know where this is going.
What I never could have imagined was that one day my own life would become the most challenging puzzle of all.
So he's sent to investigate a horrific murder that took place in a dark room with a very ritualistic vibe.
Here's what he looks like with a face.
Jay Cho.
Turns out he knew the guy in high school.
One year, he tried out for the basketball team. He tortured the shit out of him until he quit. He gave him hell.
See this murder victim? We totally bullied him in high school. It was awesome. Yeah, this is the kind of guy we're dealing with. He may look like David Boreanaz, but he's no angel. Get it? He also finds a vial of coke, which he keeps. In a weird way. Anyway, there were hooks involved. And here we find the Lament Configuration, almost hidden under a candlestick. But he's more interested in the candle at the moment because...
It's a child's finger.
Later on, he pockets some money from the victim's wallet. He also takes the puzzle box home. When he gets home, we see that he has a wife and a daughter. That's a very stylish shot.
Are you home for the night?
Actually, I caught a case.
Of course he's obsessed with his job and his wife hates it. Oops, correction, he cheats on her with hookers.
Most men just leave. I know that would kill her.
Oh yeah, so selfless of you to keep your marriage going instead of freeing up your wife to find a guy who isn't a cheating asshole.
If doing this keeps me coming back, then who is to say what's right and what's wrong?
Yeah, it's not that hard to tell in this case, actually. Anyway, hookers and blow is clearly what this guy's into. Oh, I get it, this is not Frank 2.0. For what it's worth, he's already more interesting than JP.
Come to daddy.
Granted, that's not saying much. Speaking of which, he still had the puzzle box with him, so the next morning he starts fiddling with it in the bathroom. Uh-oh, it's never a good sign when the puzzle box makes that configuration. When he leaves the bathroom, he's suddenly not in the motel anymore, but what appears to be a child's bedroom.
I'm dreaming.
and suddenly Cenobite. Actually, it's the Wire twins. They, kind of bring a more literal meaning to the term torture porn. But Joseph seems to be into it. Along with another new Cenobite, Torso. And finally, Pinhead. Yeah, I know it's very early for him to show up, but he has very little screen time in this movie, so it's kind of nice to get a little taste of him early on. That sounded kind of wrong, but I think Pinhead would approve. Apparently that was a nightmare, but he wakes up on the bathroom floor with a puzzle box, so it's hard to say how much of it was. But he is back in the motel room. So anyway, Joe goes back to work and talks to the forensic scientist, who has some news about the damage caused by the hooks.
They weren't like piercings for jewelry. It was something bigger, more cutting, like
maybe it was supposed to hurt.
Bingo.
And the finger.
Well, the print was burned off completely, but from the bone growth, I'd say the kid was about 6 or 7 years old. From the blood flow and tissue morbidity, I'm pretty sure when the finger was cut off, that kid was still alive.
So a bit later, he gets a desperate call from the woman he was with last night. How long are you gonna just sit there and listen to her scream? Well, he's obviously too late, but he goes back to the motel room anyway. We don't see the evidence of it, but he finds her dead in the shower.
Check out the bathroom.
When Joe's partner Tony goes to investigate, Joe gets a pack of cigarettes and a pen out of Tony's car without getting fingerprints on it.
What the fuck? What the fuck do you mean you stayed there last night? Jesus Christ! What the fuck did you do?
Afterwards, he tells Tony about the prostitute last night
I have no fucking idea who did that to her.
and tries to get him to help him cover it up.
If I get connected with this thing, everything I have, my family, 10 years on the job, gone.
Against his better judgment, Tony helps Joe clean up all the fingerprints and any evidence that Joseph was there last night. And while Tony is calling it in, Joe plants his cigarettes and pen on the scene, stabbing his partner in the back, metaphorically. Seriously, Joe is a special kind of asshole. Nice jump scare. Anyway, he finds another dismembered finger, and this one is fresh.
This child is still alive. We gotta find this kid.
Anyway, a fingerprint that was on the Lament Configuration matches up with something, and it leads him to a body-piercing parlor, which is called stigmata, which is interesting. The first definition listed for stigmata on dictionary.com is a mark of disgrace or infamy, a stain or reproach on one's reputation, which can be twisted a bit to mean body piercing in a negative way. But it also describes part of Joseph's motivation. The murder of the prostitute could leave a stain on his reputation, which is part of why he wants to solve this case. Nice one, movie.
Let's talk about the box. A little gold box, about 4 inches square. J. Cho told me I could find it here.
It turns out that the first victim owed money to someone called the Engineer.
And you tell J. Cho the next time I see him, I'm gonna rip his fucking head off. And he'd still be better off dealing with me than with the Engineer.
I see what you're doing here, movie. Also, I love this guy's crown of thorns tattoo, because another definition of stigmata is marks resembling the wounds of the crucified body of Christ. I guess this guy is just really into that concept.
Hunt for the Engineer. And the Engineer will hunt you.
He also has an interesting tattoo on his back. That was part of the background music, but for a second it sounds like the Wire twins have chipmunk voices.
So are you gonna frisk me or fuck me?
But it turns out that Joe was hallucinating. Little less subtle with the stigmata on that tattoo.
There's my man.
Hey, man, how are you?
Afterwards, Joe goes to see an ice cream man who sells cocaine on the side.
I want my, birthday present.
She got a lot. Fucking birthdays.
Seriously, dude, I think you've had enough. When you start seeing Wire twins everywhere, I'd say that's a bad sign.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Either way, Joe questions him about the prostitute.
Who does she work for?
Oh, come on, man. I'm out of that business.
And then the questioning turns into a pretty rough interrogation.
What am I, your whipping boy?
Yeah, about that.
I never met him, I swear to God, I just heard stories.
So it turns out that the prostitute works for a guy named Terry, who worked for the engineer, and it didn't go well for him.
And finds out that he's in love. Well, they decide they're gonna get married. But the engineer said no. Then one day, Terry came home and just a note where her body should have been. It said, I kept what I needed. The rest is yours.
You talk to him. By the end of the day, I want to know where I can find the engineer.
Sometime later, Joe meets with Tony, and he's worried that Joe has crossed a line.
Otherwise, you just keep crossing them, one after another, you know, until you're just lost.
Oh boy, he has no idea.
I'm gonna tell the captain about Daphne, about wiping your prints off. I'm gonna tell him what we did. It's the right thing to do.
So now Joseph finally comes clean about framing Tony.
Where's your pen? That's right, it's probably at the crime lab by now. Forensics picked it up. You left it at the scene. You left your smokes there too, Tony.
But not as a confession.
You have 2 years in the precinct. Who do you think they're gonna believe, me or you?
You fucking scumbag.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So he's going to blackmail his own partner. If Tony helps him cover up his indiscretion, he'll cover for Tony and say that he just messed up while they were at the scene.
The worst you're gonna get is a verbal reprimand. Just had to cover my ass, that's all.
And I trusted you.
After Tony leaves, a kid shows up with a VHS tape for Joe, which he just puts right into the restaurant's TV. I sure hope there's nothing horrible on it.
Please stop.
So you can't see anything, but a guy is getting flogged with hooks off screen, and the sounds are pretty horrific and telling. Yikes. If you remember a line from earlier, you might figure out who's being murdered. And then we see that this guy is the murderer. And he has an interesting method for burning the fingerprints off the fingers, as he's leaving another dismembered finger for Joe to find. We also get a glimpse of his handiwork. Remember this comment he made earlier?
What am I, your whipping boy?
Later, Joe tries to show the tape to people, but there's nothing on it now.
Okay, I know what I saw.
Joseph, we've already been through the entire tape twice.
The captain is worried about Joe, so he tells him to go see the department counselor.
There's a child's life at stake here.
All the more reason. It's not optional.
Please, sit down.
There's mention of him being a priest, which is a really subtle clue to something really big that gets revealed later. Also, it's hard to tell with the beard and glasses, but this guy is played by James Remar, also known as Movie Raiden 2.0. I just thought that was interesting. I'm also now imagining what this character would be like if played by Christopher Lambert. Probably a lot more hammy.
Sorry.
That's a Chinese thing, right? For stress?
Just keeps me in the zone.
Close-up magic. I bet your daughter loves that.
I just mostly used to entertain myself.
And hookers. Later that night, after we get more noir-esque narration,
Dr. Gregory said that he envied the innocence of children. But staring at the faces of 1,000 missing kids, envy is the last thing you feel. And most of these little ones were gone for good.
Grind those balls, sir! Grind them!
he hallucinates the same Cenobite from the videotape. The next day, they found the ice cream truck.
Doesn't this guy usually give us the finger?
Of course, Joe knew about everything that was going to be in it because of the videotape, but Tony is suspicious that he was involved somehow.
It was on the fucking videotape!
He also finds a clue that leads him to a bar called Crossroads. Is that more symbolism? I guess that Joseph was at a crossroads when he had to decide what to do about the murdered prostitute.
I'm looking for Mr. Parmaggi. Does he still work here?
Anyway, it's run by this weird guy.
I know all the faces, though I can't say I remember yours. I can assure you, Detective, you're quite mistaken about the engineer's message.
And there's the faceless Cenobite again. Hi, Wire Twins. Hi, Torso. And then a couple of cowboys show up and kick his ass. Stop! You're reminding me of Walker, Texas Ranger.
Still gonna find that child.
That I suspect. is the object of the game.
So Tony helps him out and wants to take him to the hospital, but Joseph demands to be taken back to the police station. He actually goes to see the counselor again.
I was first on the force. I heard about somebody called the engineer. And then today, I heard his name again. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It turns out that he does know something about the engineer.
My first year as department counselor.
He tells a story about someone a lot like Joseph who had a case where everything led back to the engineer.
And in his delusions, he elevated the engineer to a figure of almost supernatural power.
Dealing with the engineer messed with his head so badly that he couldn't take it anymore.
Until one day he came to work, sat down behind his desk, and shot himself in the head.
Interesting.
The detective had it with him when he shot himself.
And this is also not the first case of the puzzle box being on a murder scene and then disappearing.
What is it? You couldn't get out of your head. I think you know.
It's called the Lament Configuration.
Okay, since this is a fifth movie, I think I can leave out the part where he explains the Lament Configuration and Cenobites. If you don't already know that stuff, go back and watch my previous videos. Better yet, watch the movies.
Others call them demons and say they take you to hell.
Hell? They didn't take me to hell.
You sure about that?
You opened the box?
Yeah, last night.
He admits that he's been seeing Cenobites ever since he first opened the box.
But the history is consistent. It opens. They come for you, and they leave. So if you're saying they left you behind, and you're still seeing them, then maybe they're still here.
Not exactly the news he was hoping for. Well, I'm past the halfway point, so I'm going to end part 1 here. I honestly recommend giving this movie a chance, so if you have any interest in it, go watch it before I get to part 2.